Okay, so I better be as well. Hold on 2 seconds. Okay, I'm going to reconvene into open session. Mr. City Attorney, are there any announcements?
Yes. Earlier this afternoon, the City Council went into closed session and had a special meeting with respect to giving direction to its real property negotiators with respect to the property identified on the agenda. The council gave direction. At this time, it would be appropriate to adjourn the special meeting.
So adjourned. Okay. Sorry, getting my official script out here. Okay, so now I would like to call the regular meeting of December 9th at 3 o'clock to order. And as always, we begin with a pledge to the flag. And Councilmember Napolitano, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Rapidly.
Please place your right hand over your heart. Repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Justice for all. You guys sure went fast.
Okay, let me put this over here. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Napolitano.
Still here.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes,
Mayor
here.
Pro Tem Lesser.
Here.
Mayor Howard.
Here. Excellent. Okay, approval of the agenda. Oh, wait, I need to find my. Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Montgomery, seconded by Councilmember Lesser. Call for the question. Okay.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, excellent. Now we will do public comments, and speakers may provide public comment on any matter within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city, including items on the agenda. You get 3 minutes for your public comment.
So no 2 bites.
Not 2 bites at the apple. Sorry, Mrs. Phillips. Go ahead. Or Ms. Phillips, go ahead.
Thank you, City Council. I have some just comments based on the PowerPoint that I read. I would like to understand the disruption to neighboring streets. What is expected during the construction of the different types of structures? What is the anticipated lifespan of each type of parking structure? What are the expected costs to consumers to park vehicles in an automated system versus the self-park system? When I looked on the internet, I didn't really understand how, like, wheelchair accessible vans will be accommodated in the automated system. I'd like to better understand that. Are there any longitudinal studies, 5 to 10 years, on the costs associated with maintaining, repairing, updating technology for the automated system, especially in the coastal adjacent areas? In the event of a malfunction, what processes are in place for vehicle retrieval? And then for the last week or so, I've been getting all these emails from the cities on sustainability and environmental protection, but I didn't see that addressed within the PowerPoint. First is, what about solar panels for the top of the structure? That wasn't addressed. Will the automated parking systems be powered via wind, solar, natural gas, or fossil fuels? What are the plans for the backup generators? How will they be powered? Again, solar panels. The environmental impact of underground versus above ground areas vary significantly due to factors such as land use, construction materials, energy consumption, and storm water management. I'd like to see an objective assessment with the numbers so we can make a comparison of the different types of structures. And then I know this is a very complicated project, so thank you everybody for your time and the progress to date. I only noticed one e-comment on this very important project, and there's not a lot of people in the audience. So I was just wondering how the City Council will get more public input into this project, because it is, even though it's downtown, it kind of affects the whole city with its cost and its impact. If you want to visit, and do I want to pay, I don't know, is it $10 or $20 to park in the automated system? So it really does have an impact on the whole city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Are there other public comments in chambers? How about on Zoom?
No request on Zoom.
Okay. All right. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Community Development Director Heiss to start us off on the consideration of redevelopment options for parking lot 3.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, good afternoon. Today I'm going to introduce Noon Nguyen, our Senior Management Analyst, to present this topic.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor Haworth and members of the City Council. The item that I have before you today is the presentation of a high-level analysis of redevelopment options for the Parking Lot 3 site. By way of background, Parking Lot 3 was located on the corner of Morningside Drive and 12th Street and was a 3-story structure with 145 parking spaces. Constructed in 1971, the structure predated planning and building codes, which included crucial seismic safety measures. Prior to the February 2024 City Council Work Plan meeting, Public Works had a work plan item to obtain a feasibility study for the reconstruction of Lot 3. However, at that work plan meeting, Lot 3 was identified as a priority project, and staff was directed to evaluate redevelopment options for the property, including development of commercial buildings such as a hotel, as well as the consideration of parking elsewhere in downtown, thus resulting in Lot 3 evolving into an economic development study and transitioning to the Community Development Department. In May of 2024, Cosmont Companies was retained to evaluate potential scenarios and alternative options for redevelopment of the site with the intent to recommend to the City Council the highest and best use for the site. Cosmont was tasked to review the background information and evaluate proximate private property suitable for joint use, shared parking, and redevelopment options. Cosmont's analysis provides a series of potential alternative scenarios comparing cost, complexity, and feasibility with pros and cons of each option. In July of 2024, staff elected to close Lot 3 structure indefinitely following a series of inspections and structural assessments indicating that advanced deterioration had significantly compromised the integrity of the structure. At the September 3rd City Council meeting, the City Council declared a local emergency at the Lot 3 structure and authorized the city manager to secure, demolish, and replace the structure. In November of 2024, Parking Lot 3 structure was demolished and removed. A temporary surface parking lot with 70 spaces is underway until the long-term vision for the site has been determined. I would like to mention some redevelopment limitations and considerations for the Parking Lot 3 site. The most significant is the 26-foot height limitation established by the local coastal plan for the parcel within the downtown commercial zoning district. Any change in height would require an amendment to the local coastal plan and approval by the California Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission would likely require parking spaces to be replaced elsewhere in the vicinity of the downtown if the city chose to develop Parking Lot 3 with uses other than parking, or if a parking garage with a reduced number of available spaces is provided. Another factor to consider is whether a trash enclosure is necessary within the new structure, as the previous structure included a trash enclosure. The previous structure also projected over the right-of-way on 3 sides, which allowed for more usable space on the top floor. It is possible for the new structure to do so again. However, the degree to which that could occur has not been determined. One additional consideration to account for is that certain disposals of the site for non-public uses, such as the sale or lease of 15 years or more, could mean that the property is subject to requirements of the Surplus Land Act. This act requires public agencies to take certain steps, including designating property as surplus property and providing notice of the availability of the land to certain qualified entities, such as housing sponsors, prior to being sold or leased for non-public purposes. Such qualified entities would have 60 days to express interest in acquiring the property for affordable housing or parks and open space. That concludes the background of this item. At this time, staff is requesting that the City Council review the presentation, discuss the presented options, and provide direction to staff on next steps. Depending on the direction of the City Council of the desired uses, Community Development staff would turn the project over to Public Works to prepare a request for proposal for a feasibility study. I would now like to bring forward representatives from Cosmont Companies to present their findings. We have Larry Cosmont, Chairman and CEO, and Will Soholt, Senior Vice President. We also have staff from Building, Traffic Planning, and Public Works available for any questions that City Council may have. Thank you. Oh, and Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Larry Cosmont, Cosmont Companies. I have Will Soholt from Senior Vice President from Cosmont with me as well. We've had an opportunity, we're asked by the city to do an initial evaluation of parking lot 3. And you're going to see a fairly detailed, although it's an initial presentation, there's a lot of work to do yet, but there are a couple of focal points that I'd like to underscore before I ask Will to come up. One, because it's an initial evaluation, just like the prior speaker from the public, there are so many questions that are detailed that still need to be gotten to. There's no doubt about that. The fundamentals of this discussion, though, is one, what's the highest and best use of the envelope? When we have a beach community that, has a great amount of traffic at peak times, and we have a significant demand for parking. So the logical conclusion is that the highest and best use would be parking. The second consideration, I'll go to that first page. The second consideration is envelope constraint. Based on the local coastal plan, you're looking at a 26-foot limitation in height. And unlike the prior structure, which we've now torn down, we have some limitations today on how much overhang you could sort of accomplish with a new parking structure. So likely is the 145 spaces you had, you can't really fill and accomplish in the same space above ground. In other words, you don't have the capacity just on a pure build to really get to your full 145 without going underground. So the primary question is highest and best use. Is it parking or some alternative use? If it's parking, then it's an envelope question. And the envelope question says that if you're going to stay within the guidelines of your own zoning and LCP constraints, you won't make that number of 145 as a full replacement without going underground. That question then gets you to the next question is, if you went underground, does it make sense to connect Lot 3 to Metlocks under Morningside because you pick up some capacity that way and you may pick up some circulation? All of these, by the way, will be gone through by Will in greater detail. I'm just trying to frame for everyone sort of the real estate and utilization question because it's a combination of both. As soon as you get through that, and corollary to that real estate and utilization question, it's a financing question. What makes sense economically to produce that highest and best use delivery system that you want? So one other alternative when you're trying to get to envelope capacity and a legitimate approach would be to go to an automated garage. I mean, the world of automated garages has changed significantly in the last 10 years. But it's not a perfect product, and it's a product that's still evolving. What it does do in this circumstance is it makes that envelope much more efficient. So that same square that you have with the 26-foot limitation is going to get you over your 145 without going underground. And then you could still go underground. So that,
are those built by the same people who build our escalators at Metlocks?
No, they're really not, I hope. That would be
And I do want to ask a question. When you say automated, what you're saying is no meters, it's a ticket, you go out, there's a...
Yeah, it's essentially an elevator system for cars, right? That's really what it is. And because, you're basically moving cars.
Oh,
yes,
no, that's
right.
not what I thought you meant.
Yes, right. That's what that's, yeah, it's a
Okay.
it's a mechanized automated garage that has some elevation capacity and basically storage capacity and so on. So it's just a different form of delivery of parking, and it's come to a little bit more of a acceptable standard because, in urban areas where spaces are tight. And it just so happens that one of the few characteristics that beach areas have with urban is tight spaces. So it makes sense to take a look at the automated storage facility at some level. My sense is when we look at it and drill down that there are going to be a number of reasons why it likely would not be a preference. But I think it's too early to just rule that out because, again, if you're trying to achieve envelope capacity, it's a legitimate way to expand the capacity of parking. Back to my highest and best use question, if you believe that parking is the highest and best use in that location for our beach community, then you really ought to consider capacity at every level, at any alternative capacity. That's really why that discussion is in there. It's not a recommendation. It just says that automation gets you capacity that self-parking doesn't, so it's worth a look, especially in a tight, confined area like this where parking is a premium, okay? So, then back to envelope utilization. The ability to use a portion or all of the current Lot 3 envelope for another use, whether it's a hotel or a portion of the use like commercial retail, that's another option that you have. It starts to meld with the increase in capacity you might get by linking the lots under Morningside and Lot 3 to Metlocks. In other words, to the extent that you create underground parking capacity, you might expand the above-ground capacity, which could include another use, like a portion for retail or all of it for a hotel. Another option worth exploring. Again, this is really all for, the presentation today is all for you to get your arms around those choices and decide what the priorities might be so that the staff and Cosmont and others can drill down on more detailed questions. We can bring back a more solid set of recommendations based on the choices and priorities that the council chooses for the next leg of the journey. There's one final piece that is also part of the discussion, and that is when you have envelope constraints like we do, and you have high demand like we do for parking, the highest and best use likely, you want to also look outside the envelope physically, meaning are there other sites adjacent that would make sense to either acquire or joint venture or collaborate with. Of course, the U.S. Bank, the Vaughn sites come to mind, maybe the B of A. Those are privately owned properties, but they may become available, they may not. They're an important strategic consideration, especially for all beach communities. I mean, Cosmont works with a dozen beach communities up and down the state. Parking's always a premium. Space is never as much as you need or want. So the adjacencies of uses, the adjacencies of ownership, and the potential to acquire or co-venture so that you create more parking capacity always is an important prospect of any analysis, especially one like this where you're looking to replace an asset that's central and critical and now missing in action. So with that, I'm going to ask Will Soholt to come up and take you through on a more detailed basis the alternatives that I just went through. It's a pretty long PowerPoint, so I just would say that we're going to hit the high points, knowing that you're going to have very precise questions, and we can drill down on the information in response to the areas of interest. I think that's a much more efficient way for us to go. We had to do the work so that we could get to have an intelligent conversation about this. Again, I think it's the very first leg in a journey that's going to take us a while to get through, but it's a good start. So, Will, you want to come up and we'll go through it? We're both here available to answer questions as you desire.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, staff. Will Soholt, Senior VP with Cosmont Companies. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As Larry indicated, we've got a long PowerPoint. Obviously, it was part of the agenda packet that provided a lot of detail that was intended to be somewhat self-guided, but surely there are questions that come up from some of that material. And as Larry indicated, I'm going to call out some specific bullets on most pages, and on some pages we'll drill down a little bit. A lot of the material at the beginning is background and for reference. Talks about, as introduced, we were hired to look at some of the opportunities and options related to the Lot 3 structure. I'm going to point out that we've got 145 stalls in question at the Lot 3 as it previously existed, and surface parking of Lot 3 as currently contemplated would supply about 50% of that capacity. And so in terms of a delta, you're looking at about 70, 75 spaces that would be lost. Again, 145 spaces, there were 143 meters. You had a 3-level structure, primarily made out of steel and concrete. I'll point out the average square foot per parking stall was about 360 square feet based on kind of rough math. For a super efficient parking garage, you're probably at about 300, 325 square feet. Typically about 350 is a fair number. 400 is when you start to be less efficient. And it's not uncommon for 425 square feet per stall when you've got a lot of circulation. And if you look at, in fact, this slide, the middle deck, it points to 440 square feet per stall. That's due to losses in circulation. The reason this structure worked well overall is because you could load off the alley. You didn't have to have circulation dedicated to it. You could load off the alley as well off of 12th Street. And you can see here on this next slide, the area in yellow, those are areas that the second and third decks encroached over the adjacent right-of-ways. It consumed the entire alley, of course, but then hung over the Center Street and then the alley to the west of it as well encroached. And then the ramp to exit encroached over Morningside Drive. As indicated, the lot will be repaved. It'll provide about 70 stalls, so again, we've lost about 75 stalls. And I'll point out that we've heard anecdotally the area businesses reported impacts to their business when it was just the top deck that was eliminated. That reduced the parking count to about 89 stalls, and so we expect there to be some loss of activity in the overall area as a result on an ongoing basis. This slide just pointed to where people in general were going from Lot 3. This is not a perfect analysis. This is from a data source called Placer AI. It follows cell phone data and just looks at, generally speaking, where are people going. So you can see a lot of people going to the beach as an example, a lot of people going to restaurants and other similar areas in the region, in the downtown area. This slide is similar cell phone data. It says where are people coming from that park at Lot 3. On the left-hand side, you've got at least one visitor over a 6-year period, 2017 to 2023. In the middle, you've got at least one visit per year, so about 5 or 6 times more visits between that same period. And then on the right-hand side, just pointing to where the primary visitors are. So you've got a fair number of people coming from outside of the city, traveling to the parking lot as it previously existed. In terms of day of week, time of year, et cetera, I've got some peaks of inactivity and in the post-COVID environment, 21, 22. I'll point out that 23 did decline a little bit. We don't have 24 data up here because of the impacts of closing down the lot as well. No surprise during a month of year, the summertime is busier, but it doesn't drop off completely. In terms of day of the week, again, no surprise, a lot of weekend activity, but again, does not drop off completely, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You've got 2, kind of generally speaking, peak hours, midday or lunch crowds, and then towards the evening as well. So no surprises, really. This just shows conceptually or for background where the other lots are located, but the takeaway here is you've got quite a number of stalls in the downtown area, a lot of parking capacity, and it is being utilized. This looks at revenue per day per stall and points to, if you look at kind of Lot 3, Lot 2, Lot 6, the pier lots, they're getting a lot of activity. I will say that Metlock has a lot of activity, but it's skewed by city hall use, other uses and users that aren't necessarily generate revenue, and also not accounted for in here are the use of parking permits. So these figures are after parking permits. But the takeaway for us is that you've got a lot of activity, Lot 2, Lot 6, Lot 3, pier lots, and so this is a structure and a parking demand that needs to probably be somehow met or replaced. This looks at the actual revenue for the last 3 fiscal years, about $600,000 for Lot 3. The takeaway for us here is there enough revenue to self-support the cost of replacement parking? As we sit here today, that revenue was generated without offsetting debt, right? You own the house, you're renting it to somebody else, you don't have a mortgage. In this case, to the extent we go forward and replace that parking garage, you could potentially have a mortgage, but that could be funded with the parking lot revenue. Overall, though, Lot 3 made up about 10% of the citywide revenue that we're looking at. In terms of potential other land use options, this slide just provides general context and background on the rents that we saw in the area. So to the extent you had a land use other than parking, what kind of rent might be achievable. And I'll point out kind of the 7 through 9 and 6, those comparables. 7 through 9 is Metlocks, 6 is just outside of Metlocks, but very strong rents. So 6 is on the corner here, 401 Manhattan Beach Boulevard, $145 per square foot, triple net. So very strong numbers. These are on an annual basis. And then number 7, 120, approaching $120 per square foot triple net. The triple net means that the tenant has to also pay utilities, maintenance, an allowance for property taxes, things like that. So the landlord gets to recover additional expenses. And then 9 is a second floor office as an example, almost $80 per square foot. So these are very strong numbers, no surprise. I've got a very active and vibrant area with a lot of very attractive real estate. In terms of sales values, You can go through them yourself, but generally speaking, in the $2,000 range, sometimes approaching the $3,000 range per square foot. So very attractive rates, and well in excess of the cost of actually constructing that square footage, or so that office square footage or retail. And so the difference between the cost of constructing and these values are essentially residual land value. And on a very broad brushstroke, we'd say that generally speaking, the land is perhaps worth about $1,000. The land is perhaps worth about $1,000 per square foot. On a very high level, very broad brushstrokes, right? In terms of the alternatives, as introduced, we looked at a new self-park structure. We looked at a new automated garage, and we'll dive into that in a little bit of detail, talk about what that looks like, how that works. As Larry introduced, we looked at, does a hotel, what could work on the site with a hotel, and public parking at alternative sites. And we're really going to focus on 1 or 2, and then spend a little bit of time on 3 and 4. With respect to a new self-park structure, given the prior configuration, current code, other requirements, ADA, et cetera, we estimate, and this is very preliminary, we don't have blueprint drawings, of a potential structure on the site at this point in time. This is broad brushstrokes, general takeoffs, general measurements. If you stayed within the footprint of the existing lot, so you didn't have those same overhangs as the prior structure, we estimate you might be able to get about 105 parking stalls and a 3-story structure. That top structure would have to be within, even the railings, as we understand it, would have to be within 26 feet of grade, given the requirements of the local coastal plan. And so that's a very constrained site. We'll go back to the notion that if the lot is paved, just surface parking, the current estimate is that we could get about 70 spaces on a surface park lot. So to go from 70 to 105 spaces would require 3 stories. Not a lot of gain, right? And a lot of that's due to circulation loss, please.
I just wanted to interject that we looked at some preliminary concepts, and we don't think the 3 stories would work with the 26-foot height. Because you have to account for the rails. You may be able to get the 3rd-story deck in at 26 feet, but your rails, your lighting, your elevator shaft would all have to be below that, and we don't think that that's feasible.
Yeah, and obviously, sorry.
I was going to say, on that point, so you're saying, is it without the 3rd story you can get 105?
When we looked at it, we just did a crude test fit, and it would require, we think, potentially doing semi-sub, so you maybe dig down a little bit for the first level to give yourself a couple of feet below grade, and then add a deck, very low clearance deck for the middle, if you will, and then the 3rd would have to be just to railing height. You would have to achieve ADA by having any elevator access to the 2nd floor and utilize a ramp. Basically, you'd have to, you get into grade concerns, right? You'd have to have the correct grade. You would actually have to have a flat pad or a flat area, and then continue the ramp up. So the 3rd floor would have to be accessible to your ramp. In terms of light standards, you would, as we understand it, you would not be able to have even light poles above 26 feet, and so you'd have to figure out a way to light from the existing railing, as an example. It would, this sounds like staff has studied it more. Yeah.
So that gets you 105?
Correct,
Okay,
with 3.
thank you.
To answer your question, thank you, yeah,
All right.
three levels would require 105. And at the end, we've got a sample of what that super inefficient layout could look like conceptually. With respect to the parking structure, we're, given that, assuming that it could occur, what we generally see right now is that an inefficient garage would cost you about $65,000 per parking stall. These are order of magnitude. This is a question of, is it 10 million versus 50? So while that's a fairly precise number, it is very early on in the process, and costs can vary wildly given what's going on in the construction market, given the type of construction, et cetera. Assuming you did 105 stalls, you're looking at about $7 million plus or minus, and that works out to about $400,000 per year if you assume a 30-year financing at a municipal rate on a tax-exempt basis. Generally speaking, these are rough orders of magnitude again. And then ongoing costs vary, but for comparison purposes, we utilize a figure of about $600 per stall, and that pays for things like cleaning, painting, regular sweeping of the structure, et cetera. We talked a little bit previously about the increment that if you're looking at 70 surface lots, and this only got you to 105, you're gaining 35 parking stalls at a pretty extraordinary cost. Effectively, you're only adding 35 stalls, and that gain is roughly 195, call it $200,000 per stall. That is roughly equivalent to buying land for $560 per square foot. That said that the land in the area, you can assume, generally speaking, $1,000 per square foot is a fair comparison, so you're ahead on that game. You know, you're not buying a surface lot for $1,000 per square foot. I'll point to the bottom here as well. We think that, as was introduced, to the extent you do want a self-park structure on the site and you want to achieve the same parking count you had before, you're probably better off going underground, because you gain that required that incremental width or aisle width by encroaching on Morningside Drive, on 12th Street, et cetera. It's a game of inches with this lot, if you will. The lot width, and we'll talk about it in a minute, is just narrow enough that it makes it extremely difficult to park efficiently on the site. And that's why you saw what was there. That's why Lot 3 was the way it was. That's why it had the wings over the alley, 12th Street, et cetera. If you had to go underground, placeholder values, $70,000 for the first subterranean deck, $90,000 per stall for the second subterranean deck. That's assuming pretty efficient layouts. So here on the right-hand side, you've got a map, kind of what I'm talking about. You see the dashed boxes to the north, to the south, and to the east. If you could encroach on those areas below grade, you would gain a lot of efficiency. You can see how Lot 3 was laid out previously. You would need a little bit more width north to south, if you will, to have those same configurations, but you could see what you achieved, essentially 4 parking aisles with 2 drive aisles and ramps. That's a fairly efficient layout.
What are, I can't remember now, the parking entrances to the building on Morningside and 12th right there, across from Metlocks? Where do they access theirs? On 12th Street?
Oh, they do? Oh, it's 12.
13th. I mean, the question there is, can we get rid of 12th Street? We could actually, yeah. You would vacate 12th from east of Crest Drive to Morningside. And turn that into additional parking to widen the lot.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. To answer your question, Councilmember Napolitano, there are alternate access points for those properties on the north side of 12th Street. So 12th Street is not necessary for vehicle travel. You can reach the underground, or it's actually a surface level parking structure for the corner property from the alley at 12th Place. And then the Bank of America lot and Rock and Brew can be accessed off of Crest Drive.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Pretty good. So I'm trying to find the laser pointer here. There we go. Is that not quite showing up there, is it? Yeah. Okay. So there was a request to use the laser pointer. So if there's another way to do that.
Go ahead.
How about the same consideration for Center?
Center is used for a lot of deliveries to the back of those businesses there.
Yeah.
That's where they all pile up. Also trash access.
Yeah, and there is some access to some of the retail via Center Street as well, absolutely. Yeah, so conceptually speaking, the way to gain efficiency is to encroach on those other areas. I think that's clear. To the extent that there's an appetite for that, you may be able to have some efficiencies with the self-park structure going forward. This image does also talk about and speak to the potential to connect on with a subterranean connection to Metlocks. I think that is achievable. Down on the lower right-hand side, you can see a side view of the drawings for Metlocks, the blueprints, if you will. And so we drew out a conceptual connection on the second floor. It's kind of in the corner pocket there of Metlocks. If you were doing a subterranean self-park structure or even automated structure and wanted to continue across Morningside to make that connection, we don't think it would be cost prohibitive. It is something that is feasible and might add, some operational efficiencies. You do have a storm drain line in the street, though, that would have to be considered, and the depth of that we did not know at the time of the preparation of this. In terms of the potential to self-park with additional amenities we've drawn out here on the east side of the existing lot and west side of Morningside Drive, the potential for a possible first or second floor amenity. Anything's possible with this configuration. You're going to lose a lot of parking. You need typically the ramp space to achieve the parking on the lot itself. But to the extent you were going underground, this starts to be something that could be more conceivable, and maybe you would even increase the footprint, again, because if you're going underground, or if you permitted the abandonment of 12th Street as an example, you've got the width that would serve to create an efficient structure. With respect to cost, the takeaway here is it might be expensive if the city constructs it. Alternatively, the city could lease out space and a private party could construct it. But the takeaway is that there is enough value in doing that the economics of real estate in the area support the construction of amenities on this site, certainly, and it would pay for itself conceptually. We've talked a lot about the 26-foot height limit, so that's something that would have to be worked with as well. And I'll talk about some of the other questions that were asked about solar panels in just a minute. The second scenario we looked at was an automated parking garage. So this is a garage, and I'll show you some photos here in just a minute, where you essentially pull your car into a stall, you get out of your car, and your car gets whisked away and stored for you. There's a lot of benefits to this. There's certainly some concerns with it as well.
Excuse me, before you go to
Yeah,
go back to the last slide, there was just something I didn't quite understand with regard to there was a sort of a statement here, which is different than facts. I recognize there's a lot of presumptions here. But economics appear to support some commercial use of the top floor, but less accretive than street frontage opportunity.
Sure.
What does that mean?
Yeah, thank you. The rent is lower for the top floor.
One more time?
The rent would be lower for the top floor. Potentially. It depends on how you lay it out. There's some opportunity if you've got a view.
That's what I was about to ask. You have here cited on the east side, but on the west, wouldn't there be an ocean view?
Sure. There is an opportunity for that. We've certainly thought about that as well. It's something to look at further. We'd say it's less accretive, to be delicate with it. If you're looking to put a restaurant on the second floor, usually the rent is less than the first floor. If you're looking to do office, sometimes you've got patio, things like that. If you look at Metlocks, there was an effort to kind of have some of those second floor opportunities. If you have an office on the second floor, usually the rent is less than the first floor.
And the verb accrete in this context means?
It generates value. It will add value.
Over time.
Yeah. Even on a present value basis. But so less accretive if you were to, let's say that each square foot of retail on Morningside Drive was worth a net of $400 per square foot. Maybe it's $300 or $200 per square foot on that second floor.
Thank you.
I also want to, somebody in the room has some audio coming from their phone. I can hear either talking or audio, so if it's not necessary.
It's just the police.
I wasn't going to call, you have to hear it, sorry. Okay. No. Thank you for keeping us safe. Support the police. Okay, okay, good. That's great. Thank you. Never mind, carry on.
So in the realm of hypothetical, you're talking about commercial space. I suppose there's an argument you could put residential up top. I suppose there's also an argument that the city could use a density bonus to exceed its own height and density restrictions on that if they wanted to.
We did not look at residential. Density bonus is always a possibility, although I don't know how that interplays with the LCP. I think.
Right now, it's a little bit complicated because our LCP doesn't outline development regulations for a vertical mixed-use structure. So that's something that the community development team has been working on in hopes that we can amend the LCP to develop these mixed-use regulations. At the time when the council, back in the day, adopted mixed-use regulations for vertical mixed use, the direction was not to take that forward to the LCP. So that is something that we're struggling with and trying to address so that in the future, if there is mixed use, if you wanted to do retail and housing, we have the ability to do that in the coastal zone.
And my question was going back, sort of related, back to when we were talking about the surplus land actor, that's a new condition, a surplus land, because back in the day, we had a surplus land committee with the schools, et cetera, et cetera. Hold
Yeah,
on a
I don't buy
second.
that argument, though. I read that, and the Surplus Land Act, I mean, unless you declare it surplus, it's not surplus.
Except,
If you are going to try and, there are many exceptions or exemptions. If you're going to try and lease something for more than 15 years, it used to be 5, now it's 15 years, then you have to go.
Then you have
You have to
to.
go through the process. If you are it's especially pertinent if you're going to consider a residential use. That's when it comes into play.
or retail, because it has to be non-pub, so if it's non-public, we're good. So like, parking is, hold on a second, council member.
My hand is up. I'm not
I
stopping
had,
anybody, so.
you interrupted me, though, because I was the one
I
who was
had a
asking
question.
questions about surplus land, and you interrupted me. So I'm going to finish mine.
Go ahead,
Thank
finish
you.
yours.
So the point I was trying to make is the surplus land, we don't have to deal with that if we are doing straight parking, because that is a public use, right? So then we don't have to worry about entering into a 15-year agreement. It's a new, I guess it's state law, right? Because it's completely different than it used to be.
It
So then,
changed in 2023.
2023. So I think that where we could, perhaps there's some kind of math that we do where it's like, okay, this much is parking, but this much is mixed use, but then we have to only allow for a 15-year lease or open it up to other people.
There are, yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's a great question. There are other exemptions. Some relate to the size of the area that's potentially being sold or leased. The 15-year is a term exemption that explicitly, if you lease it for less than 15 years, you do not have to go through the Surplus Land Act process.
So if less than, right?
Correct. And so conceptually, if the city elected to build a private, let's say a retail component or something like that, and they only entered into leases that were less than 15 years with a restaurant or something like that, which is a time frame that's probably economically viable, then you would not have to go through that process.
And if we didn't have to go through that process, I'm just trying to avoid, we open ourselves up to that process, and then somebody could come in to do an affordable housing project. That's what I'm trying to understand. How much are we opening ourselves up to that?
It complicates things, and increasingly so over time.
Thank you.
Well, I would, right. But then you have LA County that owns Marina Del Rey, that enters into 60-year leases on a regular basis.
It is a new requirement, certainly. It is a new wrinkle. Metlocks could not have happened today without going through the SLA, the Surplus Land Act process.
So just to be clear, in the, Mr. Napolitano, that in this world of Surplus Land Act, which didn't start until 2023, other than some timing exemptions for deals that were in process at the time, today as we sit, you're either exempt or you're surplus, right? If you're surplus, you have to go through about a 150-day process, which includes 60 days of asking the world whether or not they want to bid on the property to produce a private use. To your point, private use, right? Public goes to the exempt side. If you keep it exempt, or if you lease under 15 years, or you're less than a half acre and many more, you have that exemption. So you're either exempt in the new rules, not in the old. So the leases for the county, which I've worked on, those existed at a time where you didn't have to do Surplus Land Act. But when they come back, they're going to have to reconcile with the Surplus Land Act. Another way to get through that to the county, for example, is they could meet or achieve the affordable housing quotient that really Surplus Act is driven to do. It's driven to say, city, county, special district, you bought a property, it's in your garage, it's still yours, now you need a garage sale permit, and the way you get that is you give us affordable housing.
Yep.
or you tell us you're exempt and we agree you're exempt, and HCD is the judge and jury.
This is a big wrinkle.
Yeah, so I just want, it's a big wrinkle, that's all. It's just,
Well,
it's-
so if you're gonna lease it, I don't see why we would be leasing it.
well, you lease because most public agencies don't like selling, of course, they keep the public asset, right? So you would lease it,
If we wanted to do restaurants.
if you want to do
or
restaurants and so on.
Hotels.
I don't see us doing
Most,
any of
it's
that.
not always, but I would say that in the 100-plus surplus properties that Cosmon is doing, most of them either trying to get exemption for a public use, or they're looking to surplus, half okay with surplusing for affordable housing, the other half wanting some other use. So they go through the process in the hope that they can end up with another commercial use, non-residential, and in that case, you still have to place a 45-year covenant for 15% affordable on that site if 10 or more units are ever built on that site. So there's no real free pass here other than those nuances that I said. Public use, less than 15 years, right? Basically, and less than a half acre. That's really, it is a pretty all-encompassing set of circumstances. It's pretty new. And they just produced, as of August 1, another 100 pages in regs. And believe me, it's a full-time job for consulting firms like Cosmont, but it doesn't get the state that far down the road on a lot of things, I think. But that's what we have to deal
I
with.
appreciate that, because
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to understand.
So we did see a little bit on High Rose on state need, competing state needs. So is there a hierarchy? So Coastal Commission says here, you know, we want you to replace the parking spaces. And then the housing say, we want, hey, there's land. I mean, does one trump the other?
No, I think the trumping comes with the decision to do one or the other, in other words. So if you're taking away parking, then you've got a coastal discussion you've got to get into because you have an LCP encroachment, so to
Right.
speak, right?
And the acronyms for other LCP.
Local coastal plan, right? Sorry about that, yeah. So,
That's right.
so it really is very situational. So these things are not entirely compatible. They're a little bit sequential as well. I mean, so yeah, I mean, you would think that the coastal plan would sort of, you know, would have a priority, but to the extent that you could convince the coastal commission to enable an amendment that said we can use some private uses, now you're back in the Surplus Land Act
Right,
program,
okay.
right? Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to talk about some of the points on the prior slide on this slide, just to give people an understanding of what this automated garage is. The picture on the bottom left, the building there, that's West Hollywood. The picture above that is also the West Hollywood parking garage. So what happens is if you are using an automated garage, you pull in essentially to a garage, a one-stall garage, like you see in the upper left-hand photo. You get out of your car, you kind of check in with a self-service kiosk that's as part of that bay, and then you get out of your car, a garage door closes behind your vehicle, garage door in front of your vehicle opens, and these little sleds come out and do the magic work, if you will. On the upper right-hand side, you can see a series of vehicles. Now, each of those has been moved by a sled. So the moving parts in this system, in this particular system, there's other designs, but I think this, if the city elects to study this further, this is probably the closest thing that you might consider. A sled effectively lifts up the vehicles from underneath the wheels and then moves it along, coasts along the ground. So that's one moving part is the sled. The other moving parts are in yellow on that upper right-hand slide, where you've got essentially elevators that move up and down and left and right. And they carry the sled and the vehicle. These can be completely enclosed. So you've got a building that you can have whatever facade you want on it, but it can be environmentally controlled. There's a question about escalators. It's not perfect, but you can have some environmental control within this box, if you will. And the pieces that need to be replaced over time are the sleds and then those elevators. These are typically done with electric, the movement's typically done with electric motors and cables, things like that. The second bullet there is that when people are designing these, they go kind of two routes. Some are proprietary. Increasingly, they're using off-the-shelf components. You want to go down the off-the-shelf component route, so if something happens, it's easy enough to swap out. The decks themselves, the layers that store the vehicles, depending on the preference of the local environment, those can be steel, they can be concrete. You might consider concrete here more. And so that is not as much of an environmental concern. It really would come down to the moving parts.
Your Honor, question?
Of course.
While you're on this, does WeHo or Helms or UCLA have residential or retail components in their automated garages?
Not within them, not attached to them.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the UCLA Health in Santa Monica is the only one I think they've got office as part of that. And so the benefit of this is that you can really configure this thing however you want. All you need to do is to have one track, if you will, that goes left to right and up and down. So you've got a bay that's up and down, left and right. From there, everything moves on a sled, and those sleds they don't care what shape the garage is, if you will. So you can have one floor that's really wide and the next floor is narrow, et cetera. And so there's a lot of flexibility in the design consideration. On the right-hand side is a sample configuration with the system that is used in West Hollywood. On the bottom of that image, you've got kind of two circles. Those are two bays where you could drive in. To the left of that is another potential for a third bay. And this would effectively be the first level. You can have more entrances and exits if you want. It's just a function of capacity and capacity study. There was a question about ADA. The drop-off in one of those facilities would typically be sized to accommodate a vehicle with ADA. You could have a wheelchair ramp, somebody could get out of their vehicle, and their vehicle would then be taken away and parked. The constraints, I think it's on the prior slide, sometimes these will not handle full-size, like a Chevy Suburban or something like that, or a Suburban that's been lifted. So there are constraints in terms of vehicle size. That said, difficult to drive a Suburban on Lot 3 previously as well, but there's skilled operators out there that may have pulled it off better than I did. But so there's certainly pluses and minuses with this. I think there was a question about longevity. The structure itself would conceptually have the same longevity as a self-park facility. However, you're not dealing with maintenance on the exterior of a building anymore. You can think about railings and things like that that are exposed to the marine environment that need regular maintenance. In this case, you would be dealing with the facade, but not the interior. You are not having to sweep these facilities like you would an exterior self-park garage, et cetera. With respect to solar, and I think we've laid out some configurations here, but within the existing height limit, because your floor-to-floor, your deck height is less with an automated garage, it's only the height of the vehicle, so your floor-to-floor height is less than a self-park garage. You do have some potential to doing solar on the rooftop conceptually. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. And then backup systems, these typically have some sort of backup generator to operate them. Conceptually, you could fuel that with battery packs. You could fuel that with natural gas if you wanted. But typically, it would be a standalone diesel generator that's there just in case the power goes out. With respect to redundancy, because there are multiple sleds in the system, and you have sleds that are recharging and they're able to monitor themselves for maintenance issues, but you have them recharging and available. There is redundancy in the system with that, and then the last kind of critical piece is this elevator that moves from top to bottom and left to right. There are multiple elevators as well. So there's redundancy built into the system, there's monitoring systems. It gets fairly sophisticated. It is still new technology, but there is proven uptime. I think if you look at City of West Hollywood's website, they keep a track of it, and it's like 98 plus 99%, something like that. This image here looks to, could you add a connection to Metlocks? In concept, you could add another loading and exit bay, again, at the second subterranean level at Metlocks. So if somebody ran it, if there was not sufficient parking at Metlocks, somebody could pull into this bay, their vehicle would be transparent, would just move over to this automated parking garage, and then they could pick up their vehicle at either location, at any location. A benefit of the efficiency of this garage is that conceptually you would not need to encroach on the alley. You could open up the alley again to the west for pedestrian access, and you may want to do that because with the prior Lot 3, you could walk through right at the ground level. With this type of facility, everything would be enclosed, and so you'd have to walk kind of around. So you conceptually open that back up. Next slide. This is just a sample layout. This in yellow on the image on the lower right-hand side and the map as well, that would conceptually be parking decks. We show 3 parking decks here. This would be within 26 feet. We show in red potentially 2 levels of retail. You could conceptually on the second floor pull the box back, if you will, pull the building envelope back so that you could have second floor dining, et cetera. And we'll talk about in a minute. There's also an opportunity with this, probably a greater opportunity that if you wanted to eliminate that third floor of parking, you could have a full open area for dining or something like that. You could also program that for office if desired, et cetera. Bottom line, there's just a lot of flexibility with this because the automated structure doesn't care about circulation nearly as much as a self-park facility. And in this concept, we've sketched out about 8,500 square feet of commercial on 2 floors, and then 140 to 200 parking stalls. If you went down 1 level of subterranean, it'd be 140, about 140, and if you went down 2 levels, about 200, within the footprint of the lot.
Yeah, you know, we could go down this silo for a long time. The point that I want to make is the same point I made in the intro comments, is you have a capacity and envelope issue. So the mechanized structure has a more efficient approach to that space, but it doesn't come without its own set of issues. These diagrams just show you the impact of gaining envelope capacity versus, you know, scrambling for every square foot to try and make your 145 back when you don't have mechanized. That's really the bottom line here. That's why it's in here. It's not in here as a recommendation, but it's a prescription that fills the bottle with more tablets, if you will, than the other. And so it's worth looking at it when you have a circumstance in a beach community with expensive real estate, high demand for parking, and envelope constraints. That's why it's not easy to toss out and say, wow, it's like the escalators, it's going to break down. It may be that we get there. I'm just saying, though, that if you're looking at that capacity issue, this one, as you can see, is just a more efficient approach. Again, it comes with its baggage and it comes with its uncertainty. Yeah.
With my colleagues, I have a question about, I guess, all the scenarios. Has the trash enclosure been eliminated that's there now? Like in all of, whether it's automated or self-park, it seems like that's not part of the design. And that's okay, I just want to understand it.
Yeah, we have not addressed that specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think you'd have to at least assume you'd lose a few spaces from what we're talking about. And we are in the order of magnitude in terms of spaces regardless.
Got it.
That's great. Thank you. So this just further fleshes out kind of the detail. This is conceptually, you could have 2 entrances and 1 exit off 12th Street. Again, open up the alleyway and then have that opportunity on the east side of the existing lot. With respect to height, down at the bottom, we talk about kind of some of the potential floor-to-floor heights. Generally speaking, the decks can be reduced to 8 feet. We've assumed, I think, a higher level on the ground floor here. You have about 10 feet for the ground floor and then 18 feet, and then add another 8 feet, gets you to 26 feet, so you're within that conceptual restriction within the LCP, not conceptual, very real restriction within the LCP. This could be tighter, though, if you will. It could be less than 24 if desired. It could be, less than 26. It could be in the 24 range, probably fairly easily. Talked about the amenities, the potential connection to Metlocks. Similar conclusion is that with the self-park is that the potential for an amenity, would be accretive. And on this, we talk a little bit about the potential to eliminate the 3rd floor completely of the automated garage, and then you could have some rooftop opportunities, and we think with a view as well. So there might be some appeal to that. You might have some restaurateurs or others, or even office people interested in leasing an office with that type of view. It's something to consider, and there's much more flexibility if you go down this path without going subterranean, as deep subterranean as you would with a self-park facility. With respect to pricing, generally speaking, automated tends to be on par with self-park per stall from an initial capital investment. We've got 60,000 per stall. There are sometimes some efficiencies. This particular estimate is less than the self-park estimate because the structure that we were looking at previously was a very inefficient self-park structure, so it's got more costs associated with just more concrete for circulation per stall, et cetera. So this, in this case, say it might be a little bit less to do the automated structure. From an operating cost perspective, the second main bullet there, about $500 to $1,000 per stall. Again, you gain some efficiencies by not having to maintain the exterior of a building, your entire structure is not exposed to the environment, right? So you have some reduction in maintenance potentially. You don't have to sweep the facility. You don't have to light the interior of an automated garage, because the cars they don't care if there's light or not. Generally speaking, there's some lighting, but not a lot. And so you get some efficiencies. You do obviously have some costs, though. You've got some typically costs associated with electricity, moving vehicles around. Everything is counterbalanced so that you do, if you're lifting something up, you try and generate electricity when you drop it back down, things like that. But there are costs, and they're higher operating costs. And you do have maintenance, you do have inspection, things like that. And we'll have some parts to replace. So.
It's not the police.
Good riff, though.
So, then we talked a little bit about, it's good news, we can start dancing.
I could use a dancer.
We looked at hotel in either on-site or off-site parking. The reality is, given the height restriction, et cetera, if you want to supply the same amount of parking, you're either going to go subterranean, and you probably need to go subterranean and go off-site. But from broad brushstrokes, we looked at a potential envelope and fairly tight allowances, about 700 square feet per hotel room. That's gross, so the room itself is not 700 square feet certainly, but overall the building footprint, building envelope, 700 square feet per room. Figure you get about 35 rooms. Very tight site, not a good size for a standalone hotel necessarily, but boutique. A good analog of this is probably H2O in Hermosa Beach that opened up in the last couple of years. That you think that concept on this site is probably what you'd be looking at conceptually. And so you'd probably have a floor of hotel, a floor two of hotel, and then some semi-subterranean. Again, if you look to the north of the former Lot 3, how that office building has a little bit of a dive and dip in the parking, you might see something like that to meet the height restriction here. So of the various alternatives we looked at, this would generate the most revenue. I'll back up. We figured about $500,000 per year in transient occupancy tax. That'd be the main driver of economics for a hotel on the site. Figure a ground lease roughly order of magnitude $250,000 per year. Very, very high level numbers. But the point here is that you'd be making more in transient occupancy taxes than rent. And then we did look at, are there other alternatives, right? We talked about the cost of land is $1,000. Does it make sense to sell your land and try and sell or lease the land and try and integrate with another site? You do have other properties in the area that are surface parked currently. That's kind of the key piece to look at first is there surface parking, is there lack of development intensity that could be potentially intensified with a parking garage? So certainly the Vaughn's U.S. Bank site, something to watch in the future. There's redevelopment to see if there's an opportunity for the city to add parking, pay for parking, add for parking. And then Bank of America, and it was mentioned, this one may be less appealing in that you've got Highland Avenue, which is very much a front door, if you will, versus Lot 3 is kind of behind and in a corner pocket. If you're going to have a parking garage, that's what you'd want. You'd want parking where Lot 3 is, and less so on Highland Drive. And then some other notes there, but generally speaking, we'd say Lot 3 is in a good location. If you don't want to provide parking there, you're going to have to find a solution somewhere else. If you want to provide parking there and provide a retail amenity or commercial amenity, office, et cetera, on the site, you could do that. If you want it to be self-parked, plan on going underground to achieve that. If you're open to an automated garage, you've got more options and flexibility, and you may still want to go underground. I'll say with an automated garage going underground, essentially you're digging out a bathtub, right? You're just building a hole straight down, and the rest gets you don't have the circulation as you would with the self-park. Not pitching one or the other, but certainly automated garage worth looking at, given its efficiencies. And again, hotel reuse on the site, you've got some opportunity. You'd certainly have to find parking, either fairly substantial subterranean exercise or on another site, but you would generate some revenue per year on the order of $750,000 without the incremental cost of putting a parking structure on the site. And then with respect to public parking on other sites, the notion is just pay attention to what's happening, and to the extent you've got other redevelopment activity, there might be an opportunity to invest in and expand parking on those other facilities. I'm going to go ahead and go to this slide briefly. This is just a very crude, I don't know that square is not showing up anywhere else. So we've got a square on this one. It's not on any of the other images, but this just shows you with about a 90-foot width, this comes in at 80 something, high 80s, what you would have to do in order to achieve circulation and parking within that width. It's very difficult, right? And you can see why Lot 3 encroached out, that if you could just add 10 feet or 15 feet, you can gain some efficiency. You start to go diagonal parking, things like that. Whereas this is heavily circulation-based. With respect to ADA, conceptually, when we just tried to hypothesize as to what's possible, in theory, you could add a ramp. There's enough room to add a ramp to the bottom of this parking deck, if you will, that could have a different slope than the rest of the garage. This is in the, it's obviously a vision test here. It's not meant to be. It's for everyone playing at home. It's fun. Hopefully you had an opportunity to see it. This just talks about the utilization surveys. It's very good information that the city has obtained and monitored. And the takeaway is, from our perspective, everything's busy. The lots are being utilized. You need the parking. And then this is just a revenue summary. This actually is points to the fact that people are going elsewhere from Lot 3. So you're not completely losing the revenue. There is a substitution game going on. You are seeing increased utilization rates. But at some point, you are losing out to some revenue. At some point, everything is full without Lot 3 there. So, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. So, just, thanks for indulging us. It's a bit of a presentation, but it's a complicated little exercise, as you can imagine. So, sitting in your chair, if I'm the city and as your advisor, I'd say you really have to make some key choices about what you think is the highest and best use for that site. I think if it's a parking focus, then it really becomes a question of how do you get to a most efficient solution with aesthetics and everything else in mind: convenience, safety, trash, trash facility, handicap facility. All of those are not diminished in importance whatsoever. This is just a high-level analysis that said, look, if you're looking at parking, you've got that self-park alternative or the automated. The automated gets you capacity, has other issues, but we can explore it if you want to. If you want to eliminate it, we don't have to. I think it's worth a look, but that'll be up to you. The self-park comes, I think, almost, in my view, with a mandate to look at connecting underneath to Metlocks, because you've got footprint constraints, and if you can pick up, it's all about square footage and capacity. If you can pick up that square footage and capacity going underneath and linking to Metlocks, then you have a whole bunch of circulation and efficiencies. You may have some costs, but that's worth the analysis. I think the 12th Street idea is worth going for, too. I mean, that is, that's something that would change the circulation aspect of the town a little, because we all know that that's a pretty driven thoroughfare, but it's worth a look, because you're really looking about achieving more real estate because of the constraints of your parking envelope as they exist. The other considerations are really a matter of almost economic development considerations. Do you, at any level want to consider, to the extent that you can create envelope capacity because of automated, or create envelope capacity because you expand underneath to Metlocks or expand to 12th Street, then do you want to use some of that capacity in the envelope you've created for a commercial endeavor, whether it be retail or hotel? The hotel, though, would really want to use all of it. The retail would be a partial solution. So that's a subset. It's almost, as I say, the adjacency to Metlocks is one subset of capacity. the other subset of capacity, to the extent you create it, do you want to use some of the envelope for another use? Another sort of priority question for you. And then finally, don't underestimate the compelling nature of beach real estate, and to the extent that you can acquire property that may be put into place either on a joint venture basis, let's say U.S. Bank property came along, those are really realistic considerations. You're in the parking business. You saw one of Will's charts where you've got lots all over. You're in the real estate parking business. So to the extent that an opportunity becomes available, I think you have to act as an operator of real estate and say, you know what, maybe we should take a run at that at one level or another. So talking to the Vons folks, just went through a transition, keeping an eye on U.S. Bank, and whatever else may come up is just something that's incumbent. I think on any, we represent Hermosa, Redondo, lots of beach cities up north as well, Pacifica. We say the same thing. I mean, you're in that business. Real estate's hard to come by in beach communities. Keep a lookout. See if any of those potential opportunities add value to what you have to deal with based on what your own resources are and the limitations of those resources. So we're here to answer questions. The first leg of the journey, it's really, I think, looking at staff and Cosmont looking for council to decide, what the primary choices they want to evaluate are going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councilmember Lesser, I see you. I wanted to add for the public here and not here and on Zoom, it's important that we leave enough time for the questions and the discussion. As you said, it's a very complicated presentation with lots of options and lots of questions, and so having it on its own, I think, is very important, and I appreciate questions that have been brought up already, and we'll see where we get to at the end of so much time. But with that, I see my council member colleague, David Lesser, has pressed his button.
My first question is for the city manager, and that is to explain for the public why 8 days before a new council is seated, this council is speaking about this on an off-council day in the middle of the day. I think we probably need to give an explanation to our incoming new council members as well as members of the public about this very weighty issue that's going to impact our downtown community.
Absolutely. So as you heard in the introduction, this has been a request from this council since February when we discussed the work plan item, and Community Development Department has been working hard to bring it back to this council so that this council could get a general sense of what are the options for this property in the future. Having said that, we fully understand that there's a new council coming on board, and what really we're trying to accomplish tonight is to show the council and the public what are the opportunities here. Recognizing that we're likely not to receive one direction this evening. It's really just an understanding of what are the options out there. Is there anything that's completely off limits that we want to take off the table so that staff could have better direction on narrowing the options down?
Okay, and also potentially...
And also not to lose the momentum, given the circumstances with Lot 3, which we didn't quite expect in February. There is a lot of discussion in the community about what's going on next, and we don't want to lose that momentum.
I think I would add also potentially to allow staff to do some further research so it's available for the new council when they see it as well as the public.
Absolutely.
So I do have a question perhaps for Larry and his team, and that has to do with slide 19, if we could show that. It has to do with how much space we potentially have to work with on a subterranean basis. That is, how far is our footprint that we might be working with? Obviously, there'll need to be cost analyses, but I just wanted to confirm that it includes the adjacent roadway on Morningside as well as 12th Street. And the one plate I saw was, or slide was 19. If we can get to page 19.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. Sorry, I was trying to pull up this one because it's actually got the calls out on square footage. So if I can highlight this for just a moment, please. Thank you. The alley, Center Street is 20 feet in width. I believe Crest Street is 20 feet in, the alley that was abandoned, or the street that was abandoned, that's in yellow to the west of what is or was Lot 3 is 20 feet in width. I don't have called out the width of 12th Street, and we don't have this on the parcel map either. Now we're going to 19. Yeah, so conceptually that box to the south or bottom of Lot 3 there, that's a 20-foot wide box, and so I would just visually estimate about 40 feet in width for 12th Street, encroaching to about the sidewalk on the north side of 12th Street, would be a rough order of magnitude. In the morning side, perhaps about 50 feet or something like that.
So this council could, for the next step, request sort of calcs of how much additional parking we would get at what cost for a subterranean with this expanded footprint, correct?
Absolutely. I think that's probably a good next step, is to look at what's feasible. When you do that, and especially from a self-park perspective, that's a critical question as to what does that layout look like, how much can you gain in terms of lot width, if you will, which is north to south in this case. And that also opens up the opportunity, given the constraints of the site, to the extent that you wanted to add, you still wanted to add an amenity. If you go subterranean, that opens the door for an amenity. It's a much easier opportunity to add something else on the surface at that point. You can have an access point on the side or wherever that's just a ramp down.
Next, I wanted to ask about the potential connection to Metlocks. What I've observed with the existing Metlocks lot, before Lot 3 was closed, particularly during the height of the summer, is that cars would back up in the lot. Do you think that one connection is going to be sufficient, particularly if you have a line of cars that are circling for spaces? Might there need to be a second connection point so that there could be a better flow of traffic?
Certainly, the more connection points, the better. If you look at the, it's kind of hard to see, and I don't have, this is not working, right? It's tough to see on there. You can kind of see the footprint of Metlocks. It kind of, where you've got the connection, where you've got the two arrows, the orange arrows going left and right on the screen. That is the closest point between the Lot 3 footprint and Metlocks. The subterranean structure continues to the east. There's a wall there, if you will. And so the restaurants that are along Morningside do not have subterranean structure underneath them. And so to the extent that you wanted to make another connection point, you would either have to go north or up from the two the orange arrows that point back and forth, or you would have to reach some sort of agreement with that building owner to go underneath them.
Okay. Any further rules of thumb in terms of preliminarily coming up with the costs other than what you've already presented in terms of the added cost of subterranean? Are these realistic numbers, or obviously we're going to need to?
Everything needs to be studied. I think that you can easily get into the $100,000 range per stall.
That's my worry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, that would, sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm not sure if you know the answer or it's a finance question. On page 13 of your slides, there's income for Lot 3. Is that just meter and ticket income?
To my knowledge, this is just meter income. And you say ticket, not parking enforcement. I'm pretty certain that it would not be excluded. And I don't believe it includes permits.
Or cell income. Before we took Lot 3 of a cell site, your corner grid on Lot 3 was a cell site location.
Correct. My understanding is that this is just meter revenue.
That is correct.
Okay. So that would be one thing that's missing from this. I'll hold. No other questions for now.
Okay. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes, thank you. It makes a lot more sense going through this with you standing there. So we're going to invite you over to our homes when we go through these individually. Just putting this aside, we've been talking about e-bikes, scooters, and, this, that, and the other, and shuttles. To the extent that transportation will have an effect, we hope, on diminishing cars coming down to downtown and share riding. I mean, it seems like I just don't want to get into this building all this stuff for a soon-to-be dinosaur, or maybe not in my lifetime, but, just something. We're plus 50, how many years from Lot 3?
I think that's right. I think
It was
it's in the
54
70s,
years?
71, yeah.
54 years from now, they're going to, what were they thinking? Okay. So you don't have to answer it, but I think that needs to be considered. Since we are, and you've seen it up and down the coast, where e-bikes are, taking over the streets. We hear it all the time, I understand, and we're doing our best to educate the kids. We also have to educate adults because they go through stoplights and the thing. But just, have you seen anything, or is there any basis of knowledge? Again, you don't have to, or projection rather, you don't have to answer today, but just something
Is there a way to find out?
that
if
we
we're
can
getting-
kind of have on the side to say, hey, you know, we're going to put this, but let's take away some because we may be able to find, you know, more use for, and I always use the example of surf PE class, you know, at 6:15 in the morning down at the pier. There's not one parent waiting there. There's not one parent that had to take those kids down there. They're all on e-bikes with surfboard racks.
Wow.
And,
Ban them all.
you know, so I just don't know how much that's going to spread.
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we're out of time. No.
Well, again, I don't expect an answer.
It is a fundamental question. I think there's the notion that people will own fewer vehicles, right? That there will be more automated vehicles. To be determined. I know that from a design perspective, probably not appropriate, potentially not appropriate for this site. There are architects that are designing parking garages currently in ways that are amenable to conversion. So instead of having ramps throughout the garage, they will have level areas of the garage that can be, and floor-to-ceiling heights, as an example, that can accommodate reuse. That's something to think about, certainly. Off the top of my head, thinking about your real estate, to the extent that you said today, we need a parking lot here in Lot 3, I'll tell you, that's either as a course of there being a lot there in the past, or by design, Lot 3 is in a good location for the rest of downtown, right? It's kind of in the corner pocket, as I said previously. To the extent that you had a reduced parking demand in the future, you do have other lots that are more surface-based, right? And so you don't have the same infrastructure associated with a parking garage. And so to the extent that you made a decision to build infrastructure on this site, invest in, create a structure on this site, then perhaps those other lots could come into play if there is a reduction in demand, that those would be the first pieces to come into play. The other piece for consideration is that to the extent that, you know, you're above grade, that's certainly less of an investment than subterranean, and so there's more fluidity. But to be determined, you know, what ultimately happens with demand. And is population growth and intensification of uses, does that lead to soak up that reduction in demand over time as well? And we know anecdotally that people come from LAX, from out of town, stay in the community, and never have a vehicle today. And that's not something that you would have seen previously.
So another question, dealing with the shorter-term future, is our staff did a great job of striping 90 additional spaces downtown. Sort of came in and saved the day. And so you got 90, plus we hope about 75 on the asphalt where Lot 3 is now. Could we possibly look at that? You know, take a deep dive on, you know, you got a real experiment going on right now, okay? And so say that you can really utilize 45 of those spaces. Well, now 105 with the 45 takes us back to where we were before, okay, without having to build structure. We just we thought outside the box, thank you, Eric and staff, and we see them squeezed in, and we'll have to revise that, I'm sure. But I think that should have a serious look at, so that we're not, you know, it'll take the pressure off of 1-for-1 on Lot 3.
You, not by choice, but it's forced, get to experiment with the surface lot in Lot 3 and see what that looks like for demand.
Yes, so that's all I have for now. I know I have another question, but I'll let others ask. And thanks for using the word accretive. I thought I knew the English language. That's a new one.
I had some of the, I was going a similar route as you, Councilmember Franklin, and thinking about a bunch of those, you know, the emergency stripings that were done out of the box. Were they even considered in your numbers? Because I think when you started, we weren't doing that. So were those,
Correct. We simply looked at replacement of parking on Lot 3 or other
got it.
lots not within the streets.
And this might be a question for our city manager or for ComDev. When we think about the coastal commission, and we think about our local coastal plan, if we wanted to make it so that that lot could go up to 30 feet, and I'm not saying everybody in the community would be happy about that. So I understand you didn't include that discussion really in here. That was none of the plans, because you're like, oh, but you'd have to go to coastal commission. However, if you're adding parking, coastal commission gets kind of excited, right? So is that a fair assumption? I'm going to look to our city manager, right? You're off the hook on this one, Will.
It is a fair assumption, and community development staff has initiated those discussions with the Coastal Commission to understand, do we have enough justification to request a code amendment to amend the height requirement from 26 to 30 to match some of the surrounding properties.
Right.
Particularly the ones directly across 12th Street, which are office buildings. You've noticed they're 2 stories and they have a partial, I would say it's a first floor parking underneath the 2 stories of office. So those do have a 30-foot requirement. And so us requesting to amend the code to change it to 30 feet for Lot 3, at least right now preliminarily, does not appear to be out of scale and character for what's there today.
And that could do something, whatever we decide or whichever council decides, because if all of a sudden you can have this up to 30 feet, you're certainly talking about a different envelope, so different possibilities, right? I think. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I could frame that as a question. I think it's a really good point.
I think you could frame it as a question. I believe in your abilities.
To what extent would that additional 4 feet in height assist in gaining a sufficient, for lack of a better term, because we need to really calc it, additional parking spaces?
I would put 0 on that.
Oh,
I think
okay.
you would be able to put your light standards up 4 feet from what we would
And
assume
have
you
the
could.
elevator tower.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't know if, Ryan, do you have anything to
That
add
adds,
to that?
right? Doesn't that add spots?
So in looking closely at the 105 spots, you could get that. So for comparison purposes, the 3rd floor deck of Lot 3 is at 22 feet. That's correct, right? 22 feet. If you add, right now it doesn't have an elevator. In current standards, you would be required to have an elevator. So we'd have to account for the elevator shaft as well as potentially lighting and railings. So all of that would have to be under the 26-foot height limit.
Right.
If you have a deck at 22 feet, you can't accommodate any of those other things.
Sure. Okay.
And so that's why we're thinking, in order to get to the 105, within the boundaries of the site itself, without the overhangs, we would need to go up to 30 feet.
Got it. And then if you go up to 30 feet, you're going to have those spots. Right. Okay. Thank you. Oh, wait, sorry, I'm not on, I gotta see who's, Councilmember Franklin.
Yes, if you could please go back to 19, slide number 19. I'm just having a little spatial difficulty in determining an underground. Would it be underground beneath the entire lot? I see all the, the dashed yellow lines, but is that also just assuming that it's underneath the lot?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. This is kind of a choose-your-own-adventure. You would certainly, conceptually, it might be easiest to encroach under the alley, as an example, right? But if you could close off 12th Street for a period of time, no problem, you could encroach underneath. If you could close it off, if you want to vacate it permanently, then you could use that surface area. But if everything is in play, you're better off. The critical piece here is the lot width is 90 feet in width. So from north to south, if you didn't encroach on the sidewalks and didn't encroach in the alley, you would be looking at 90 feet, and that's just not a very efficient structure. You really want to get to about 105 is kind of a nice sweet spot at a minimum, and say, the wider the better, right? 120 is even better. And so if you had to limit yourself in one direction, anything is an improvement. If you could go in the alley and 12th Street, that's a really important direction to go, because then you've got the circulation, you've got parking on each side of the circulation. It's not just circulation, or it's not just a road. You can actually park off that circulation path. Then the next thing to consider for expanding parking is to move to the right in this photo, or east to west, because then you're increasing the length of the drive aisle, those parking islands, if you will, in the middle of what here is lot 3. And so every direction that you can move is a benefit.
Okay, so this is overhang, it's not, it's indicating overhang, not?
I'm sorry.
Not
I'm sorry, maybe I
subterranean.
misunderstood your question. This is what you see with lot 3 overhangs.
Yeah,
Show
the
you the overhang
cantilevers,
here.
right?
So everything in yellow in this image depicts overhang of the former lot 3.
Right.
So you can see it was halfway to the
So
alley.
you're saying if you go further.
Correct, or you could go underground instead of having, well, everything's in play, right? If you wanted a surface lot, if you could encroach the same way that lot 3 encroached into the alley, into 12th Street, that starts to give you that efficiency from the width of the lot. The box within the yellow here is 90 feet. That's the actual lot area.
Yeah.
Right? And so you could see in the design of lot 3, they did everything possible to just get that, just enough extra width from north to south in this case. So if any of those were in play, you could do it on a surface level, all the way up, ideally. If you want to look at us from a subterranean basis, it's easier conceptually to play in the sandbox without changing 12th Street, without changing the alley, et cetera. You could go down, cut down, cover it back up, and restore 12th Street, the alley, if you wanted Crest Drive as well.
But now there's parking spaces below.
Correct.
Okay, and that's where the access to Metlocks with those big yellow yellow arrows get you over to Metlocks.
That's right, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, the key thing to think about here with this lot.
And you still have the surface.
You could, yeah. You could do exclusively subterranean if you wanted to look at that. Especially if you expanded beyond the 90-foot footprint of this lot. That's the limiting factor in this case, is the 90-foot limit. And so if you can add 20 feet, 30 feet, north to south, that really opens up your opportunities in terms of efficiency. You could go subterranean 2 levels with that kind of width, or if you could with that kind of width, you'd have a fairly efficient parking structure. You could then have a ramp, kind of wherever you want at the surface level. Conceptually, you could build on at the surface level, of lot 3.
And so with subterranean, even though they're expensive, we're still within the level, assuming the parking revenues and the cost of the bond, we're still in positive cash flow. Right?
I would say, as we sit here today, you're in the ballpark based on financing rates. When we looked at it, we have an affiliated company that does public finance. So we said, what are the bond financing rates as an example for a 30-year fixed bond? The parking revenue from lot 3 supported about $75,000 in financing, conceptually, just broad brushstrokes. And so that was the revenue specific to the lot.
The 60, whatever that chart is, this 60,000 or 600,000 a year?
Correct. I think the per stall basis. Let's see.
I know you're not spending all the money on the measure. What is the ratio? Like in homes, it's not over 30. You don't want it to be.
Oh, we use just 100% as an example. So 100%, assuming you've got great credit. If you were to do a financing, conceptually, it depends on how you structure it, but you've got other parking lots generating revenue, the city's got other revenue sources, and so we assume that you can conceptually size it based on 100% of the revenue. You wouldn't necessarily dedicate and say, hey, only money from lot 3 is available to pay this bond. You might say, you've got money from Metlocks.
Others, where there's a surplus.
That's right.
Okay, so, so I'm sorry, so you said 75,000?
Yeah, conceptually, that, just a ballpark is 75,000. Now, it's important to think about right now, or when Lot 3 was in place, you had a property that you were renting out to people on a temporary basis, right, for parking, and you didn't have any financing, any debt service. So regardless, on a go-forward basis, your income would be net of that debt service.
Okay.
That does remind me, I think there was a question about cost difference between automated and self-park. Conceptually, there's no cost difference between the two for a user. Yeah,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Other questions right now? Okay. For my colleagues, open up to public comments. If you didn't make any comments or questions before and would like to ask any now, come on down. Okay.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor. Jill Lampkin, Executive Director of the Downtown Business and Professionals Association. Mayor Pro Tem, I appreciate that clarification because when I found out about the meeting this afternoon, my head kind of spun off my body a little bit because this is obviously a very big impact to our businesses downtown. And having it in the middle of the day during the holidays is not a time when I got one board member here, but obviously very difficult and challenging. I feel like everyone is a little behind now because there was so much information that was presented. I hope that there will be more opportunities for all of that. I'm sure that there will be. It will be a very long process. But I did want to say that we were all a little disappointed with the first presentation being in a very limited format. I also just wanted to make a comment, both Maureen and I were talking about it when you were speaking about 12th Street, we need to be mindful of the fact that that is Trilogy's front door. So after all of the relocation and the reconstruction and now the Lot 3 thing, if we were to build out onto 12th Street, that's literally the front door of the spa. So kind of keep that in mind. Anything else? I think that's good. But great presentation, you guys. I mean, that was so much information, and there's a lot of thinking to do. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, any more public comments in the chambers? If not, I'm going to turn to Zoom to see if there's public comments on Zoom.
No request on Zoom.
Okay, so I'm going to open it back up to my colleagues for either questions, comments, ideas, or whatnot. Councilmember Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hey, Larry, you guys did a good job. I think there's a lot of things on there that you did as extra that don't appeal to me. I never heard a resident talk about a hotel. They'd probably recall all of us. We mentioned the word hotel. To me, this is a simple process, folks. You want to replace like for like. Downtown business and everybody else across the city wants us to replace a parking garage. We're not building a SpaceX rocket here. We want a parking garage. I understand Larry had to look at every option. I get it. Hotels, underground secret passages, driveways. What else was there? Even automated garages. I asked a question earlier. Any city done residential or retail in their garages? No, in our area. Good reason. People want to park their cars still. Until the day comes where our cars park themselves, which may happen 30 years from now, it's not going to happen next year or the year after that. People want to park their car in the garage, and that will not change for a while. Knowing that, and remember, WeHo, West Hollywood, is more dense than we are, folks. If anybody screams to have retail or residential, West Hollywood would, and they did not, for a reason. So, no in the hotel, no in residential, no in retail. Government is not in the retail business. We are, as Larry said, parking lot business and service business, number one. So no residential, no hotel, no retail, no automation. I'm not a fan of I've seen too many issues, and I'm not using West Hollywood as my piñata here, but a lot of cities have had problems with automated systems. So we just want to replace like for like. The idea of the height, We don't have a view ordinance in our city. No one's protected with your view. You may not like it, but we have no view ordinance here. If we, the council, this council, by the way, is in charge until December 17th. You're going to add 2 new members, not the new majority. So we have a job to do till that last day. This is our job. So we want to increase the height to 40 feet and get an extra floor. That's what we should do. I don't think undergrounding is the way to go. And remind everybody here, all who's been on council long enough, every underground project in the city has found, oh, surprise, utility lines that we didn't ever show. No one's undergrounded our city, commercial, development-wise, from Metlocks on, that have been delayed from underground construction. You just bit this off by saying, okay, let's go underground at $90,000 a stall, which Gensler will say it's higher than that. You're just going to add cost to it. $3 million more is the estimate to get 35 spaces, folks. That's your idea.
Okay,
$3.1 million to add 35 spaces.
underground.
Underground.
Thank
And that's conservative at $90,000 a space. That will soon climb. But the main thing we're looking for here is we just need a simple garage. I like the designs I've seen of simple lights and your outdoor fencing, or the fencing and wiring we saw at the old Lot 3. We can replace that, whether you go 8 feet, hopefully higher, and build it with an ADA-required garage. And yes, Joe, to your point, you can make EV parking and a parking corral, or find a way to find a spot for EV bikes that may or may not use the garage. We just don't want to delay it anymore. If you listen to what downtown business and Jill's talking about, they want speed, not delay, delay, delay. We don't need a study to tell us how to build a parking garage. We need to move the parking garage forward. Yes, the short-term idea that Clean you guys thought about, a temporary parking spot at grade, is great while the plans get set and go. But that's what we should be looking at, simplicity. Parking garage, above ground, build as high as we can, whether it's 4 stories or not, and we go on from there, and don't keep adding costs that are unknown to it, like an underground costing or connection tunnels. That's where I am, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Napolitano.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to take a slightly different tack. I came in thinking, okay, we'll just replace parking lot with a parking lot, but I don't think that's necessarily the best solution here. I think that, you know, when we look at different things, I was on the council that decided to go down 2 levels on Metlocks. And, you know, we're going to build it once and that was it. And there was no reason not to go down 2 except for money. But that investment has paid in the long run. And this, I'll just remind everybody, is exactly why we went for the sales tax increase and try and get a constant revenue, an ongoing revenue stream for capital improvement projects. This fits that bill exactly. But in terms of how it should be approached and going forward, and you know, the e-bike, Waymo, self-driving cars, everyone has an opinion on it. It hasn't taken over yet. We certainly have seen that it hasn't changed much downtown. I've yet to see an e-bike with a woman with a slit dress and heels on an e-bike driving downtown, or a guy in his tuxedo and top hat running around on an e-bike. It's convenient for a certain type of customer who likes to approach things a certain type of way, but not all the time and not in all ways. And Waymo and things like that, I don't know if those are going to be any cheaper. They're going to incorporate the price of someone's parking experience once they get past their initial, isn't this neat kind of thing. But they have lots of their own problems until self-driving car, until I get my flying car I was promised when I was 4 years old. Until I get that, you know, I'm very much suspect of that. I agree with Councilor Montgomery, no hotel, no retail, no residential. I think if we're going to go for parking, we keep it parking. But beyond that, I would look at a better utilization of 12th Street. You know, it might be one of our businesses' front doors, there's a sidewalk there, and you're looking at having parking right next to that. And if you have to walk 20 feet, I mean, that's what Metlocks is built about. It's about parking somewhere and going upstairs where there aren't cars right in front of your business. And actually, a lot of people have found that very enjoyable. And I'm looking forward to that surface parking lot, actually, because I think that's how it should stay for a while. I am not in a rush to replace a structure with, especially at that cost for, I would say, a minimal amount of spaces. If we're just going to climb from 70 or 75 to 105, we found those spaces elsewhere already, and we can keep those spaces where they are and probably improve upon some of them in some respects. But either way, I would keep it flexible right now. We're looking at other things in the downtown regarding parking. I'm not sold on the automated parking, but if I were, I would put it entirely underground. I wouldn't have anything at the surface so that we have the least amount of exposure to the elements. But the reliability issue, you could go 2-3 stories underground, and the efficiencies, you could stay within the 30 by 90 space and probably recover and exceed the amount of spaces that are out there now and have it entirely underground. And that's where I want to say that the surface lot and keeping that flexible for a while, I think would be a benefit to the city. I won't be around to make those decisions, but you could take that space. It's a nice space for a night market. People love all the spaces that we have at our all the different businesses that sell the food at our farmers market. We might want to move the farmers market over there after moving it over here. Having it self-contained there. You could have once a month things. You could have open space. You could have an extension of Metlocks, which a lot of people would like to have, but you can have things that you can program. I would rather have that flexible than say, tomorrow we're going to stick up another structure at a higher cost with fewer spaces when there might be other alternatives around, and one of those alternatives we talked about in closed session tonight. So rather than allude to that further, though, in terms of overall spaces, we're going to recapture those 145 spaces the second we put in that surface lot between the added spaces that we put downtown and then the new spaces at surface. And so anything above that's going to be a bonus. So do we need to, are we going to build a lot with extensions out? We're not going to get the same amount of spaces, folks. So there should be a certain threshold where the cost benefit just isn't there. I don't see it beyond 105 spaces. I don't think it's capable beyond that. But if it's 70 plus the others, plus we can find some more somewhere else, I'd stick with that, keep my options open with this particular space. You can always go up at a different time. Going down, connecting to Metlocks and everything, it sounds great, but I think there's more custom. That creates flow, but does it create spaces? I would argue that if you're going to go down, do the automated, and then you can get a whole lot more out of there. Thank you, Roger.
I just want to clarify, so I think you just answered it. Yeah, so if you go down, do automated, but you're not for going up.
Not at this time.
Not at this time, okay.
And I would direct staff to take a look at 12th Street and see if any use of that, whether a portion of it or all of it, would add parking actually right now as we do the surface lot. If you could do additional angled parking and make it one-way as opposed to two-way, that's an option too.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Council Member Franklin.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. So we'll just go down the list. No hotel, no retail or office space. I agree with that. The paving, I agree that, with Councilmember Napolitano, that gives us more time, is to have that be more time. I just did some math here, and if we do if we had 145, we do 75 with the paved lot. That's 70 spaces to make up, and I think with the ones that have been put out there, again, this is an experiment. It's a real-time. It was just like the dining decks, right? Real-time. This is our next emergency. Okay, so it's a real-time experiment. So we could find those, or at least get close enough to it. But with my, I forgot my rose-colored glasses. The microtransit. If we could, we're talking about e-bike corrals, okay? Which, talk about charging, we should include chargers for that as well, somehow. But if we really make it easy for families, to come on down, if you're going to dress up, take an Uber, because you don't want to mess around with parking anyway when you're all dressed up going to a nice. But anyway, I think we can kind of really sort of put that on and see how it feels, the 75 on the paved. And with enabling e-bikes and any other kind of micro-transportation, except scooters, I think we tried the scooters. I know you like them.
Oh,
They just scare me.
Oh.
There's just little time to recover if you hit a crack in the street. So automated sounds great, but again, you heard me express some concern about building all this for cars. Here again, we would be building a lot for cars, and then who knows what's going to happen. And especially if we go down and below, and the expense. I think the technology is very interesting, but I just don't think it fits us here, both from a maintenance standpoint and I just see people rushing to get their car, and then you got to wait for your car, and there's, I didn't hear anything in there about that analysis, about people going in and out, at the same time. So keep the paved parking lot. First of all, get it quicker as soon as we can, so we can go ahead. Personally, I don't know if you've been walking by there, but I just love the brightness it provides, right? It really brightened things up there, and I think that's a great benefit for everybody on that. And then you can see the sunset, you can see the moonrise and all that sort of stuff. So, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Lesser.
I see our role here this afternoon is limited. It's to provide direction to staff to come back with more data for the new council and for the community, to add to what the city manager indicated as to why we're having this meeting today. My understanding is the meeting on the 17th will likely be not a full meeting after the ceremonial rotation. It's possible that our first meeting in January is going to be skipped, so council will not have its first full meeting in the new year until January 21st. So this provided an opportunity today to give some direction for further study, so that staff is just not idle during this period, but is doing more while we are not meeting. And to that end, I think it would be helpful for whether staff wants to utilize Cosman Associates or needs direction for other outside consultants. I think the new council is going to need to know and need to refine the data of the costs. As we're all indicating, the costs for a minimal number of spaces, given the current footprint, is a challenge. How can we refine that? What preliminary work should we be doing? What size are we really working with? I'm not ruling out subterranean for self-parking. I'm curious to what extent we can utilize on a subterranean basis, perhaps the 12th Street, Morningside, and the other city right-of-way parcels to gain some more spaces. But we need to better understand what the costs are. What additional data can we obtain? I'm also interested in financing, particularly following the passage of this measure. What does that afford us? What does that allow us to do here, and with what period of time? And then finally, where else can we find parking downtown, particularly if we're learning that the cost to rebuild this lot for a minimal number of spaces may not be a financially wise decision. So I think the direction I would offer would be that whatever motion comes out of today includes looking at additional parcels where we might be able to find some parking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Napolitano.
Just to add to my comments, and that it's really a tag on to Councilmember Franklin's comments, because yes, that's why I said what I said regarding keeping it open, keeping it flexible, and keeping it surface for as long as possible, because it does change. Lot 3 was a dingy, ugly, dark parking structure. It wasn't going to win any architectural awards, certainly. It was functional. but that functionality is gone now. And it's irreplaceable, actually, because it can't be replaced in kind to get the same amount. So, you know, oftentimes we say, oh, what would it be like to have a blank piece of paper? And we never know because stuff is there. But this is one of those times where we're forced to imagine something else. And it's good to take a step back and say, look at what this looks like without that dark, dingy thing there, and how can we make this better in the future? And so that's what we'll leave the rest of you guys to determine.
Okay, Councilmember Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Honor. Here's a question. I don't think he knows, maybe Ryan knows. What's the water table depth there? Do we know?
Golly.
Well, Metlocks is 2 underground, so it's something less than that.
I'm wondering what's less than that as
Something
you go
more than
further
that.
west.
So I don't know the exact water table depth, but we do have other subterranean garages that are close to the beach that are multi-layer levels down.
So let's go at least 2 levels down where Metlocks was. Okay, thank you. I'm a commentary on this. Forgetting the fact that we don't know what the water table is, we'll just guesstimate. Imagine putting your home or something really valuable underneath the ground, getting to it. If it breaks down, then what do you do with it? That's near a sinkhole. That's, I mean, near the waters. I don't know what that level would be. But apart from, that's my argument against subterranean garage number 1. But clarification, I know the piece says that the highest influx or demand for parking is lunch and dinner, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's your peak time. Whether you keep the temporary spaces that we have there or not, that's your aim point. But I want to clarify that what I talked about increasing the height, is if you wanted to go above the 105 spaces that we have now maxed out at the current height limit, if you're going to increase it, obviously we get more parking up there. If you want to keep it at 105 and get what you get, keep it above ground, even with the new, well-designed, modern outdoor parking garage, that's where I was going with it. Other than that, I think we're all on the same page here. We've talked about the garage over the last 4 years, 5 years. It's not new. We've had 6 public meetings since February talking about the garage. What we don't know is what direction it's going to go and what's going to be. And the cost, every time we delay, and this is a 2 or 3 year project, when you decide, this council decides, it's not going to happen quickly, but every time we wait and delay, the costs go up. Shocker on that one. But we'll see what you guys decide and go from there.
Okay, so I have comments and maybe a way to move forward. So I think until I understood the Surplus Land Act, I was more open to like mixed use, hotel, retail. You know, hotel provides us TOT plus lease, and so it was like, oh, you know, maybe, right? But understanding the Surplus Land Act, I think really gives us constraints there. So I have a feeling that's some major education that we need to do with the community and new council members, because that cannot be on anyone's screen. So I'm looking at, you know, I made notes of what everybody said, and, you know, people were saying no hotel, no retail, no residential. I think there was consensus on that. There wasn't quite consensus on no underground. But I think where we are is, so we pave the surface lot, and we see how that impacts those 70 spots plus the other spots that we have in our town. Plus, I like your idea, Mayor Pro Tem Lesser, of are there other properties or other places where we can increase parking? But I still want staff to study going down. I think that I would want to see, I know it's expensive. It's going to, you know, it's very expensive to go under, right? But I want to see that because this is an opportunity. I mean, I remember the public coming to those meetings when Steve was but a child, and they were talking about going underground. It's like, oh, it's so expensive. That's so crazy. And it's, you know, thank God. But if we have the ability to add more parking, whether it's going underground or some other spot without going up, I think the public would just really be happy. And as far as 12th Street goes, I would explore it, but I don't think we're talking about a building with automated, you know, parking bays and sleds, because that goes right up to the next building. That I wouldn't be in favor of. That would feel dense. So I don't know. I feel like we're kind of giving some direction, but it's not definitive. Is that, can somebody help me with,
I should.
first you, then you?
Thank you. The question more for Larry and you guys on the consultant side. You know of any city that's actually gone underground with an automated garage anywhere near the coast, especially in California?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. I don't know near the coast. I think that the closest example I can think of is, I think the UCLA Health facility that's in Santa Monica. But that's
It's
not
above
as close.
ground?
That goes.
Below ground too?
To my knowledge, yeah.
Okay, so the nearest one, UCLA, well away from the coast. All right, thank you.
But we could also study, I appreciate that. I'm not necessarily limiting subterranean to automated. I'm calling it the dog sled. I don't know why. But so I wouldn't be limiting that. But Councilmember Lesser, or Mayor Pro Tem Lesser.
I wanted to confirm, City Manager, what form do you want direction today? Do you want a motion? Are you looking for a consensus that you've already gotten from each of us?
I don't feel that I have a consensus just yet. I have heard a few things about no retail, no hotel, no residential, and I did want to just confirm something that was mentioned earlier, and Mayor Haworth, you brought up the Surplus Lands Act. I want to clarify, in the staff reports, we say we're still looking at that, and if the council desired to go in the direction of a private use, we would have to continue to look at whether or not it applies. It's not 100% that it applies because there are coastal limitations and size limitations, depending on the size of the project, that we'd have to account for to make that final determination. I wanted to clarify that for the record. But if the council decides to go in the direction of parking, no residential, we do want to understand, should staff go out and study whether it's an above-ground structure or an above-ground and subterranean structure, should it connect to Metlocks, or do we table that and bring that forward at a future time? That's the direction I would like.
As a vehicle to move this forward, I've made a motion.
Okay.
But and I am receptive to friendly amendments to the extent I miss something, because I'll start with what my own
we'll let you
interests
know.
are.
I've got
But
one.
the framework is going to be for staff to do further research to come back with more information for the incoming council as follows. One, as I indicated in my comments, refine the data about the cost of subterranean as well as above ground, even though this is going to take some time, so we have time to study it. But I think the new council needs to have a better rough order of magnitude of what we're talking about if it's different than what the initial research has shown. How we can utilize the subterranean rights of way of the city, 12th Street, Morningside, and adjacent. What's available through financing, particularly with the passing of Measure MMB. Where else we can find more parking downtown, where are our options? Full impact of the Surplus Land Act. And what have I missed, colleagues?
Coastal, well, I see people requesting to speak, and then I'll say something. Councilmember Franklin.
Quick question. With the automated system, is there just one entry? I mean, like, so if there's a surge of people coming there, is it just one load move, or is it two, or is it three?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. It's designed for the site, typically. In the illustration we had, there were a total of 3 bays, as an example. There's a whole field of queuing, where you study lines. I would suspect that, in this case, without studying, that 3 is probably a fair number, but in concept, you could add more as well. And the way it works is that people are able, if they desire, they're able to have an app on their phone that gets their car ready to come out. And so usually queuing is not an issue. I know the West Hollywood website, it's either Gensler or West Hollywood that maintains a website that says the average queue time.
Can you just, we won't hold it to you, but
Yeah.
I mean, with what we're talking about here, would it be 1, 2?
If you use the app and you said, I'm coming to my car, it would be faster than trying to park in the garage, circling around for spaces
So
potentially.
you want people on their phone while they're driving?
No, sorry. When you pull up, you would see if there's a bay open or not.
Oh, I see.
You'd pull right into the bay. The question usually is
To get your car
waiting
after.
for your vehicle to get it back. If you were at a restaurant and said, hey, I'm coming, then it would get your car closer or ready, as an example. If you did not do that, it could be couple minutes potentially to get your vehicle via standard time.
Thank you. To kind of keep this train moving, I think have staff bring back more information on unlimited parking, included when it breaks down, if it breaks down, just like our escalators at Metlocks. At least on your iPhone, you'll be able to find where your car is stacked and parked, I guess.
Can we wait and hear from Councilmember Montgomery? Because I'm not sure I'm ready to support the automated full-on. So Councilmember Montgomery?
That's part of my question, but really I want to address the point and make it clear for staff and clarity's sake that this council is not supportive of residential or restaurant, any other use of that property site.
Not in my motion.
Right in your motion. No, it's clear to be added to the motion, to add that. You didn't include it, and said the council is not supportive of those.
Well, before you accept or not accept, but the city manager wanted to do the research on the Surplus Land Act, because if they're interpreting it slightly differently, then maybe we could, potentially have something there that is a mixed use.
Right, so my motion,
So you still, no matter what.
I don't care if someone else rewrites the code tomorrow. My position is that I would never support residential and retail use for that site.
Both, so.
On top of the garage, mixed in with the garage.
So not retail ever?
Retail, residential for that site, no.
Could I ask you, so I am not so keen to go along with that, and I'll, because I want to understand. First of all, I kind of like the surface and not going up, but if we were to go up a little bit, and if we were allowed to have some retail or a restaurant up there, I think that could be fun. If we're allowed to. So I don't think I'd support it if it was not ever, no way, no how. But
maybe I view it differently. I don't think your government should be involved competing against its own landlords, its own retail people and restaurant people or apartments. I think that should be used for its public use, it's zoned public use.
Okay, so just public, right, so that's fair. So unlike Metlocks.
Unlike Metlocks.
Just do, okay, all right. Thank you for explaining it that way, Councilmember Napolitano.
Well, all I'm getting from this is just go back and do more. So I don't know if that's just direction. I don't know that you need to make a motion out of it. Just go research everything that's been talked about tonight and bring more back.
Yeah, because it is.
That's all you're doing.
I think it's kind of fair, because if the new council comes in and we start talking, and I appreciate government public use, and then I appreciate, hold on a second, I appreciate you saying, well, look at what the future could hold. Maybe we don't need as many cars. I love the idea of open space on the ground, but I also, we're not ready yet, so go ahead.
I'm happy to withdraw the motion, subject to the response from the city manager as follows. Is there specific direction that you seek tonight that would be helpful to move this process forward?
And not waste time on other things.
Is there anything that the five of you would agree to take off the table? Otherwise, we will go and explore all of it.
Councilmember Napolitano.
I would take off a hotel or retail or residential at this point. I just don't see that in the immediate future we would be doing, even if the surplus land comes back, like here, green light, are we really going to get into development or a long-term land lease with a parking structure? I don't see it. That's me. And
No, I
Councilman
agree.
Montgomery,
I
but
agree.
that's the two of us. And if there's a third,
So I'm inclined, George, your position, but I'm also conscientious of where we are in time and not wanting to handcuff the future council. Moreover, as the future council looks at financing.
I thought I still had it. But I appreciate that, except for the fact that it takes three. And so if you three agree, then what the other two say doesn't really matter anyway.
I look at it a little differently. I truly am receptive to voices from the community and what people are going to say. So that's why I'm hesitant to say absolutely no to anything, and then why I'm receptive to what you suggested in lieu of the motion with specific areas to research, look at it all.
And Jill, you were correct. There's no purpose for this meeting tonight.
Well, if we can't come to consensus, there could be consensus. I mean, if there were three who wanted to support that, then you're right. There would be a majority on that. I don't
I'm
see
waiting to
three.
hear it. Exactly.
I don't,
If there aren't
unless
three, then
Councilmember Franklin,
we're
I
back
mean,
to square one.
The thing is, I think we got enough to, to cover the next 4 weeks. Then the new constituted council could come back and they can go ahead and add their opinions to it as well. I mean, we got a lot of good information. You heard my comment. It was a lot clearer when it was being explained here. We can ask questions. There's a lot of information. So I think any absence of consensus could be remedied by the new.
well, and I would
Yeah,
like
by the
to
new council.
see, I also did want to talk about coastal commission, but I would, I do want staff, well, I think we should really push this out as far as trying to get a public engagement as well, because it is such a big thing for the downtown. We may end up with no hotel, no retail. We absolutely may. But I'm not willing to take it off the table right now. I also want to look at what we were talking about with the Coastal Commission. If we think we can go up to, I mean, even though I'm not predisposed really to going up, I like the idea of leaving it surface. But we need to understand that if we do want to go up, of what the likelihood of being able to go to 30 and what that does in terms of how we park it. And also, we may be able to keep it a surface lot and put a tree in there, and if there's other sites available, so staff really has their work cut out in that regard. Councilmember Lesser.
I think it is important to continue to urge staff to look at other parking alternatives downtown and have that be something that this council is directed tonight.
Okay.
Ronnie, one last question.
Yes, sir.
So it's still, parking lot 3 is still zoned public use, correct? Public use is still zoned,
It's
sorry.
actually CD.
It's still zoned,
It's commercial downtown.
of course, our lot 3 is commercial downtown.
Correct.
So we're going to get public use, all right.
Well, it's commercial, and that, could- yeah.
But I mean, public use is different.
I'm confirming, but I don't think it has a PS is what we have.
Yeah, public space.
CD.
Okay, so that's actually different than the direction, which we could make it go that direction. but-
Whatever you want to, you put 50-story hotels if you want.
Sure.
I'm not
So,
going to be here for it.
yeah, you can throw the bricks from the public, though.
Exactly.
Try to do that.
Steve and I.
I am not saying I want a 50-story hotel. Okay, so is there still a motion, or?
I'm
we
happy to
just get
withdraw
direct-
it
I think,
if the direction is sufficient. Yes?
I do think it was important to have this much information given to us with this much time. I hope that the new council members, get some one-on-one time to understand this issue. And I hope we will continue to reach out to the public and consider our options. Are there any other further comments?
Any hotel developers?
What?
It's good in hard time. No.
Can we put a big emblem of a shark attacking people?
We can.
In the
Would
middle
that
of the
make,
parking
would
lot?
that help?
Can we do
I'm not
that?
sure why we had this meeting. I'm more sure that we shouldn't have had it at this point.
Well, Monday morning quarterbacking is always, hindsight is always worth something, 2020.
I want to make one comment before we adjourn, and that is, I think a good reason for this meeting, Councilmember Napolitano, is to give you and Councilmember Montgomery an opportunity to weigh in with decades of experience with these issues before you fade off in the sunset and throw rocks off another building.
Pretty sure nobody needed it because it's not resulting in anything, but,
Well,
you
I
yourself
didn't agree.
question why we had this meeting.
Right.
You yourself
I
question why we
do,
had.
I do have that
So
question.
why, if I was, okay.
That was my
Whatever.
intent, is to get that experience, and it doesn't mean I was going to agree, but I think it was important to have that out there. You never know, maybe there could have been a third vote, and then we would be going that way. So if there are no, yes, sir?
Well, I was just going
Go.
to say, if nothing else, we now have the Downtown Business Professional Association. It's going to rally the group and
We've got 2 years to do it.
present input, right?
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, There's nothing else on the agenda. I'm going to call for adjournment, and my gavel's disappear. Oh, no, here's the gavel. All right. We are adjourned at whatever time it is.
Lisa?
What time is it? I can't see. 5:18, we are adjourned. To 5 p.m. on Tuesday, December 17th. Thank you.